Hello and welcome back to Awakening Philosophy Podcast, where we discuss philosophy, explore what philosophy is, the power of philosophy, how we can be affected by philosophy in our own lives, how we can use philosophy to better understand ourselves, reach our highest goals, remove the problems that we face in our everyday life, and finally, exploring how exactly we do that. How do we participate in philosophy ourselves? How do we gain those benefits? How do we participate in what has been called the noblest game, as we are Homo ludinus, man the players. We are humans finding ourselves here with a mind. If we take up the task to use the mind, to know the mind, we are engaged in philosophy. As we navigate that path, we are learning the logos, because the logos is the method through which we participate in philosophy ourselves. It is the intellectual, understandable, knowable paradigm that runs through all levels of reality, and therefore we can apply it to our own personal development. That leads us to our destiny. We can also apply it to the anti-logos, understanding our problems, understanding the blocks that get in the way that lead us to our problems or our fate, escaping fate and finding destiny. We've been talking about how that's two parts to something. That process of looking for two parts, looking for its positive and its negative reflection, is something that we have been using and looking for and developing in our own seeing as our own part of the logos, because that dual side, or that duality, is one of the aspects of the logos that we are learning and putting into practice in our own lives. One example of that is to look at what philosophy is, specifically the use of our own mind applied to that which is most meaningful. Questions such as, what is the nature of self? What is the nature of mind? What is the nature of the logos? What is the soul? What is beauty? What is justice? Applying the mind to those questions, and specifically also to being. Because the answer of those questions, if the answers of those questions are knowable, which in that list they all are, that experience of knowing is something that takes part in the realm of being, what is called ousia in Greek, and what is apprehended by nous, part of your intellect that can comprehend being. So that sounds a bit strange to us in our world, but that's okay. That's what we're here to learn. And the reason why it feels strange is the negative side of it. As we do the positive, we have to see its opposite. We have to see its negative reflection. What is the negative reflection of how philosophy is understood? That is called modernism. How many people who call themselves philosophers, many in the academic tradition, think of philosophy as not the personal development to the realm of being through understanding, specifically logos understanding. They are taught themselves that it's more about opinions, theories, and the use of the logos is something called dialectic. That's what we've been learning. Its opposite is debate. How to win arguments. So what's the opposite of dialectic? Debate. What's the opposite of logos through understanding and knowing? Opinions. Right? What's philosophy hope to achieve? Similitude, assimilation, inclusion, cooperation. To make a oneness out of all people, because we all have the same problems. We all have the same structure of our problems, at least. We all have specific individual expressions. We all have the same destiny, and we all have the same path we can walk. And it's more fun to walk together. What's the opposite of that? exclusion, making people feel dumb, excluding people because they are not interested in reading a million old books. They don't have time for that. They don't know these big words, and they're not good at winning arguments or fighting, right? We've been reading the Parmenides to see this in action and to learn more about what philosophy is and what the Logos is. And Zeno pointed to this kind of use of philosophy as the love of contention. Start to learn philosophy, you think it's about winning arguments, debating, putting people down. We're doing the opposite. Instead of making people feel dumb or excluding them or exiling them from the most important task you can do as a human being, we want to include them. We want to raise them up. We want to, through the Logos and dialogue or the dialectic, help them to discover for themselves their divine and noble nature. Right? That's what we want to use it for. So, the positive and the negative. Platonic philosophy is a word we can give to the positive. Of course, we have to keep in mind that's just a cultural label, because it implies that Platonic philosophy is just one philosophy among many. But that's not the case. It's the philosophy. Modern philosophy has that way of talking. What's Kant's philosophy? What's Hegel's philosophy? And what's Frank Smith's philosophy, right? That's the many. That's the idea that philosophy is a many, or it's a list of opinions. If we're interested in truth or true philosophy, or what we could call Platonic philosophy, if we were talking to one of those moderns, we want to be aware of those objections or those counterattacks to our purpose, to our process, while also understanding why they're there, where they come from, and how even those objections have their own internal logic and can be understandable. And so we could address them the same way we address any human being who is stuck along their own process of development. Of course, they might not be interested, in which case it might be dangerous, not worth your time to help those people, to dialogue with those people, to introduce them to the Logos. But as we're seeing in the Parmenides, he is saying, I am judging you to have a good and noble spirit and desire for the Logos. Because that's the case, and because you are presenting yourself, the highest part of yourself, let's go through it. Right? In other words, good faith actors, we would call them. There are bad faith actors out there who are really tied to the negative expression of philosophy, the appearance of knowing, and that there is just the world of becoming, the physical senses, and they're closed to the idea of being. There is nothing other than the physical world. So all I can do is have what passes for knowledge in the physical world. In philosophy, we have the idea of knowledge being apprehending the ideas in the realm of being, which requires a movement of the soul from our physical world of becoming. Everything is changing, so we call it becoming, into the realm of being. That's the philosophical process, out of the cave of ignorance to the real world of true being. And that's where we can grasp the ideas for ourselves, not believing anybody else, not other people's opinions or beliefs about what's real. It's for your own self. Right? So that's knowledge in the realm of being. But for those who have been convinced that there is no such thing, or if it is, it's inaccessible to humans, they'd be more interested in what appears to be knowledge in the realm of appearance, appearing knowing. And we talked about winning arguments, using rhetorical devices to put people down, very competitive, very exclusionary, right? And we'll see characters as we read Plato's texts that exemplify that way of being. Even Socrates was influenced by that way of being when he comes in to talk to his teacher Parmenides, that we saw in our reading of the beginning of the book, the Parmenides. He thought that maybe these ideas that exist in being were nothing more than concepts inferred from the physical world, right? Which is a very common way of thinking even today. So we can be very grateful for Plato and Socrates and Parmenides. They had a conversation that is as true today as it was back then. And in reading it, applying our mind to it, and unpacking its structure so we can see the logos behind it, so we can grasp it even better, we are engaged in the very activity that Parmenides and Socrates is saying philosophy is for. We are engaged in that activity that can open our own mind to the higher levels of mind, make us more able to grasp the realm of being and knowledge for ourselves. Isn't that great? I think it's great.
Wow.
So that's what we're doing. Using Parmenides as a guide and an example to learn about what philosophy is and to develop our own selves in the logos. Now, as we have been doing that, we recognize this exercise that we've been doing to see the positive and also see the negative in whatever we're looking at. We use the example of, if somebody steals your lunch at work and you want to know who it is, look at the positive. You think it might be Bill? What happens if Bill is at work? That's the positive. This is an example of a way of thinking. Every time Bill is at work, the positive, my lunch goes missing. But can I be sure that Bill is the one who ate my lunch? Well, what happens if he's not at work? Take the negative. What happens if Bill does not exist at the workplace on that day? Well, if your lunch is still being stolen, you can come to a conclusion about your subject, about your lunch, that it probably wasn't Bill. In a similar way, when we want to ask questions like, well, this realm of being, does it really have an existence? And is it really the kind of existence that Parmenides and Socrates have been talking about? Eternal, immortal, always open to anyone with mind, able to be grasped with the eye of the mind called ousia, having within it all of the ideas that we use and participate in our physical world, having likeness, unlikeness, beauty, justice, goodness. Does that actually exist? Well, if you ask that question, and Parmenides encourages to ask that question, we would look at what happens if it does have an existence in this way, and what happens if it doesn't. So the positive and the negative, like what is philosophy, what isn't philosophy? How do we relate through dialectic, and what's its shadow? Debate. What is knowledge versus what is the appearance of knowledge? What is Platonic philosophy, and what happens if you take the realm of being out of Platonic philosophy? You get modern or Stoic philosophy. Different way of looking at things. What is the one example of philosophy? What is the many realm of opinions by those who often teach philosophy? Right, the positive and the negative. We're seeing this is the fundamental structure to something called the dialectic, which is what Parmenides calls the power of the logos. And Parmenides encourages us to exercise ourselves. Make your own dialectics. And because you're creating a universe, what if this thing exists and what if it doesn't exist? You could be saying that you're doing a what if universe. Those who are familiar with Marvel know there's a series called What If? What if Spider-Man was Captain America? Or what if the Green Lantern ring went to Iron Man or something like this? So it's a hypothetical universe in which what you are interested in happens. But with the dialectic, you also have to do what if it doesn't happen? What if Spider-Man was bitten by the spider and became a superhero? What if Spider-Man didn't get bitten by a spider? All right. So this is a kind of a fun and accessible way of illustrating these ideas by talking about pop culture, like Spider-Man and stuff. That's kind of our modern pop culture. And this is part of philosophy. Only back in Plato's day, their pop culture was Homer, the Iliad, the Odyssey. They had their own heroes: Achilles, Hercules, Odysseus. And they had their own, which of course had their own superpowers too, which is very interesting. Right? They each had their own special abilities. And a hero is someone who's half man and half god. So they had the gods also that they put into their stories. So this creating and the philosophers like Plato use these characters to do the same thing, communicate and represent these ideas about philosophy, about the logos, about the nature of mind and reality and the most important things. Not all of them, of course. That's why if you wanted to study mythology, collect them in terms of who is the writer. Because if Plato is using mythology in that way, but some other joker who lived on a street used it to express his opinions and his ignorance, then you wouldn't want to learn about Zeus by combining the two of them, right? How did Plato use it? Talk about that to understand Plato's thought, understand Plato's logos. So we can do the same thing, only with our modern culture. So I will use superheroes, Marvel superheroes, video games, anime, movies, references to Harry Potter, and the hero's journey, of course, we know about. Anybody who's interested in film writing or story writing might be familiar with the hero's journey, which is an attempt to infer from all of these examples of mythology a singular hero's journey that seems to apply to all of the good stories in all cultures. Of course, Joseph Campbell was the guy who did this work on studying different mythologies and putting together a single hero's journey, which now we learn about at film school. But of course, Joseph did not get into Plato, which is significant. So we know that there is some kind of archetypal hero's journey from the work of Joseph Campbell. We just don't know what that archetype is because, for whatever reason, I mean, we could make guesses, Joseph Campbell himself didn't get into Plato, which is Platonic philosophy. But we are. So we can find the archetype on which the hero's journey is based. What's the archetype? What's the universal journey that all humans are here to go through if they accept the call to adventure, which is the first stage on the hero's journey? The philosophical quest. That's why we call it the noblest game. That's why we call it the quest of man. And as it's a quest, we need to develop questions as we go through. Why? Because questions exercise your interest, your focus, and your attention, which is a state of mind. If you're interested in any sort of yoga or meditation, you realize these are fundamental aspects of meditation, any meditation, focusing on something. But it also utilizes your understanding. This is what makes philosophy a mystical or spiritual tradition that is even higher than most common ones because it includes understanding. You're not rejecting your understanding, you're using your understanding in a question. What is the soul? Why am I here? Where are we going? So it's use of understanding through your own focused attention of your own state of mind. So these are the two elements, understanding and state of mind. Another duad. When we're developing the logos, we look for patterns, and one pattern is the duads. Understanding and state of mind on a topic that you can eventually unite with. That is the goal of all meditations and yogas, to eventually unite or join your state of consciousness with that which you've been focusing on, or that which you're interested in. And we are doing that in the archetypal way in philosophy. Only our questions don't have to be given to us by some sort of guru who says, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Focus on that. Or focus your attention on this, I don't know, flame, candle, or whatever. They're our own questions. They're ours. So it's easier and more fun for us to have a question and be on a quest. So we recognize philosophy as the highest quest, or the spiritual quest, or the human quest. Right? And notice I'm using the word the spiritual quest or the human quest. And we use the logos to reach the destiny of man. This is a significant difference between philosophy, the philosophy, and a philosophy, or modern, or stoic, or empirical philosophy, physical philosophy. This is the Latin tradition. They don't have a word for the. So they're in the many, a example of beauty, a philosophy among many. That's the use of a applied to things. But in true philosophy, or the philosophy, or Platonic, we could call it, we use the word the. So we're after the example itself. We're after the noun. We take an example or an adjective, a beautiful thing. We use the word the to turn it into a noun, to find the thing itself. Why does that matter? Well, the thing itself, if there is a thing itself, has to have an existence different from all of its usages. If you can have a beautiful dog, a beautiful person, a beautiful painting, you can't use the ideal and stuff it into the dog because it's also being stuffed into the painting and stuffed into the person. So we recognize that the ideal of something, or the measure of something, cannot be in its usages. So it can't be in the physical world. This, of course, is a dialogue that Socrates and Parmenides had that we've went through in our text already. You might recognize some of these points. So we're interested in, well, what is the measure? What is the ideal? What is the beauty itself? That's why we use the word the, because it points to it, and something that doesn't have a physical it has a physical copies, or is expressed in the physical, but it itself exists in being. So we're interested in the beauty, or one beauty, or the self of beauty. We can use the word self in Greek tradition. So that's the difference, right? We're after the philosophy, not a philosophy. And this is the Greek tradition, which has the word the, and the Latin tradition doesn't. So that's our modern tradition in the Roman Latin tradition, which looks at ah. This is the cause of why we have this discrepancy. It's interesting to discover, because we have to look for the times when we ourselves have counterattacks from our upbringing. Oh, that's just a philosophy, that's just your opinion, or I don't care about truth, I just want to win the argument to sound smart and you're a dummy. These sort of arguments might get in the way of our growth, but we have to recognize them while also doing the work to find the truth about the philosophy. And so we're asking the question, what is the hero's journey? What is the archetype? What is the purpose and the destiny for man? The archetype you'll find in mythology from Plato. And this is why we use the word the. It's universal. So you are having a call to action, just like Luke Skywalker had a call to action, Harry Potter had a call to action, a call to adventure. He had to cross the threshold into the new world. If you look up the hero's journey, you'll recognize these as stages. So too are you. As somebody hearing about philosophy, someone from the other world saying, oh, by the way, this is what Plato and Parmenides and Socrates are talking about. Yes, I mean, obviously in the Dark Ages when the church became powerful and there was lots of oppression and everything, the plague happened. That happened right after this tradition was shut down. So we know what happens when there's a counterattack against truth. We know this and we have historical evidence for this, but also it's a human condition. There's always the counterattack. That's why we have to be aware of it. So that's what we're discovering about the hero's journey and the true philosophical quest. That's what we're on. And so the dialectic we're learning is the way in which we use the logos for that quest. And so this exercise that we've been doing for our own benefit to see the positive and see the negative, we're seeing, oh, actually Parmenides is saying that's part of the dialectic. You're kind of doing the dialectic vaguely, but there's more. There's 4 steps within each universe. What if the thing exists? Or what if beings exist? What can you say about it? What can you say about how these beings affect others? What can you say about the others now that they've been affected? And how would those others relate back to the subject? Right, we've been talking about this as the structure of the dialectic. Parmenides has been encouraging us to exercise ourselves in whatever we're learning in philosophy in this kind of way. And it will also be a preparation for his dialectic, which isn't a dialectic on beings, that goes one step higher and uses all those beings that we have an understanding of because we've been doing these exercises, uses them as parts to create an even bigger painting about the self, which is even the cause of being. That's the essence of the Parmenides that we've been reading. So it's very exciting. By the way, so those 4 categories, I can represent it in a mythology, which is part of it. So we're learning new ideas, new terms, but sometimes it can be complicated. Sometimes you want a simpler way to remember it yourself, or talk about it with your friends, or express it to the world through your art. That activity of taking these philosophical ideas and relationships, terms and relationships, and expressing them through drama, through narrative, through characters, that's called mythology. True mythology. Of course, you could make stories to, say really terrible things that aren't true, but if you use it in this way, it's called true mythology. So I tend to use modern cultural references in my analogies, but you can make a simple one. Also, let me give you an example. We saw that in the Parmenides that we've been reading, and we're going to be reading today, that we are being encouraged to exercise ourselves in something called the dialectic. And the first exercise is on this very question. Do beings exist in this kind of way? Or are the scientists right? Or, the people who call themselves philosophers who like to argue and don't actually think there's a realm of being that we can all access together, and so we should be on the same team. They like to make money by being experts in Plato's day. So are they right? This is the first step into the philosophy. Otherwise, why would you care about doing philosophy if you didn't think the beings existed? Or open to the possibility, at least. Because, hey, Socrates, Plato, Parmenides, from what I understand, they are 3 of the smartest human beings ever to ever be human beings. So I don't think they're probably wasting their time. Maybe they're onto something. Maybe there's a reason why they're called wise. But it's not just a matter of believing these people who've written these great works and achieved these great things that are true even 2,000 years later, still helping humanity. You want it for yourself. So the first thing is, well, do these beings even exist? That's your first exercise, okay? So the beings, which are the many beings, if the many beings exist, what can you say about them? And then if they don't exist, create that what-if universe. That's the dialectic, the first exercise that we're encouraged to do. So what if it does exist? What if it doesn't? Because these are the two options. Either beings exist and what follows, or they don't exist and what follows. Within each essay or story, you have 4 categories. If the beings exist, what can you say about them? If the beings exist, how do they relate to another? You can pick your own. How do the beings relate to its cause, the one, or the self? Or how do the beings relate to us? You could pick. So pick another that it relates to. Having been affected by this realm of being, how would we relate to each other? How would we talk to our friends? How would we live our lives? And finally, having been affected by those beings, how would we relate to philosophy? How would we relate to beings itself? So, as an example, I could use a simple mythology and talk about a bike. Of course, it's not really mythology unless there's some superhero involved, but as an example, as an analogy, I could say someone wants to know about a bike. You could talk about what the bike is. It's got wheels and a handlebar. How does it function to another? So I'm picking me as the significant other to talk about it in reference to. Dialectic is two things. One thing and a key thing that it relates to help understand it. So what's the bike itself? One, how does it relate to me? It helps me get to the store. It helps me get to school without having to spend too much time. It gets me places quicker. How do I relate to others now that I have a bike? Well, I talk to my friends about how much I love the bike. I can get to my parties quicker, so my friends are happier with me. I can even join the BMX club and I can meet new friends. That's how I relate to others now that I have the bike. And finally, how do I relate back to the bike? Well, I have to maintain it. I have to change I have to oil the chain every now and again. I have to make sure the tires are pumped up. All of these things are required to really understand what a bike is. If you're missing anything, you're not quite understanding it fully. So that's the dialectic, the full way of exploring an idea. You can express that mythologically with a mythological character. For them, it would be Zeus or Achilles. For us, it would be Spider-Man or someone like that. So I could say Spider-Man as a superhero to represent the super beings or the eternal beings. So if being exists and therefore there's a philosophical quest, I could be asking the question, expressing that same idea mythologically by saying, I'm going to make a story now. If Spider-Man was bitten by a spider and became a superhero, what if that happened? So if Spider-Man was a superhero, what could you say about Spider-Man? How does he think about himself? How does he build his webs? How does he feel about being a hero? Right? This is a good introduction to a movie. And then how does Spider-Man relate to another? So how does he relate to... you can make it about Spider-Man himself, and how does he relate to the people of New York, where he lives? He could rescue them. He could inspire them. And then the next part of the movie is, so that's self itself, self to another, other to other. So how do those others in New York, having been rescued and inspired by Spider-Man, how do they relate to each other? Do they like him? Are they friendly in New York people? Are they afraid because there's a vigilante? You could explore any of those ideas and make a cool movie. And finally, how do those New Yorkers then relate back to Spider-Man? Do they celebrate him? Do they make him an ideal that they aspire towards? Do they hate him and want him run out of town because he's a vigilante? So these are the 4 categories represented in a mythology. So you could say there are 3 aspects to philosophy: understanding the logos and applying it to the ideas in being as your spiritual development, as your personal development, to the ideals, becoming more ideal yourself. And then those ideas are recognizing they're all of self, so you can come to know the nature of the self, and that's your destiny. So the logos applied to the journey to our destiny. You could apply the logos to understanding the patterns and structure of our problems and what's the cause behind that. Just like the self is the cause of the ideas, what's the cause of all of our collection of problems? So we want to purify ourselves from our problems, perfect ourselves in our development, but also in between applying to both. Mythology. Because you could, if mythology is a remembering device, a mnemonic device, you're remembering the same patterns that apply to both. So that's what we're doing. And that's what the philosophy is, or Platonic philosophy, but really the philosophy. We also call it the perennial philosophy because it's the parent philosophy. And now we're reading Parmenides, which outlines all those points. All of those things are just what Parmenides has been saying. It's a summary of what he has been saying. It's not from me. It's not my opinion. It's what Parmenides is expressing to Socrates. And then we skip the exercises. We don't actually have any example of those exercises, those what if Spider-Man exists, or what if the soul exists, or what if will exists, or what if life exists, or we haven't done those. We've skipped those, but we're using all those subjects as terms to do the greater dialectic. So we see two kinds of dialectic. We can call one on the realm of being Zeno's dialectic, because Parmenides says, oh, by the way, these exercises, that's what Zeno, my student, has been doing. So we could call it being dialectic or Zeno dialectic. But then Socrates says, can you give me an example? But not of beings, of their cause. Can you give me an example of this dialectic you're saying that we have to do as philosophers, and I have to learn how to do, me, myself, Socrates has to do? Can you give me an example? But about the highest term? Can you tell me about the self? And Parmenides laughs and says, that's the hardest thing you can ask someone to do. That's crazy, man. You have no idea how great a sea of logos we would have to swim through. That's a mental thing to ask somebody. The ultimate dialectic that uses all of the other dialectic is like the Avengers. You need all of the superheroes. You need Spider-Man, you need Captain America, you need Iron Man, you need all of them together to become the Avengers, or to become the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You want me to do a dialectic on that? Well, first you got to know what Spider-Man is. You got to know what Justice is. You got to know what one is, what whole is, what part is. You probably don't know that yet because you haven't done the dialectics on them. So I'm going to have to introduce quickly a mini dialectic on each of them and use them as a part within my greater dialectic, which has the positive and negative. There's four categories of each. But not only that, there's 9 categories because there's my idea which sits above all of them. Because this 4 and 4 relates to if the beings exist and if they don't exist. If Spider-Man was a superhero, if he wasn't a superhero. If Bill was at work or if Bill wasn't at work. But the self is beyond existence. So I have to do 9 hypotheses, 9 categories. That's crazy. You're crazy. Get out of here. But Zeno, Parmenides' student, says, actually, Socrates says, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to ask your student Zeno to do it. Clever. Zeno laughs as well. And he says, well, actually, I'm with you. Let's ask Parmenides to do it. I haven't heard that in a long, long time. Let's get him. Just like we talked about philosophy being the ideal or the paradigm or the model or the archetype for all heroes' journeys, all expressions of that in game or film, we are seeing Parmenides' dialectic, which is not being, but uses being. It's not Zeno's dialectic, it's Parmenides' dialectic. That would be the archetype or the highest expression of dialectic itself. So we're learning about dialectic from the ultimate expression of the dialectic, which is fantastic, which is fascinating, which is brilliant, considering we saw how important it is, right? It's the power of the logos through which we can reach our highest goals, which we all need individually, within our relationships, and as a society, as a race. But also you can use the dialectic to understand the cause and nature of our problems. We all have problems. All relationships have problems. All societies have problems, and humanity itself has problems. So this rediscovering of what has been buried for 1500 years is necessary for us, for all of us, for anyone we care about, and for humanity itself. And not only is it that important, we have the ideal to learn from. So that's super exciting and super cool, but also needed. It's needed, it's necessary. It's worth doing. And that's what Parmenides said. I'm only going to run you through this ultimate dialectic on the self because I find it necessary to do so. Which is a puzzle. Why is that part of it? And for us to learn, we develop puzzles as we go through, develop questions. We're adventurers, and we have a question sack. Question inventory. Fill it full of questions, puzzles. That helps you in the way we talked about. Focuses your mind, keeps you open, keeps you wondering. Because it's not just an intellectual understanding exercise. It's about your state of mind. So we need an open, curious state of mind as well. It's part of it. Both. So, with all that in mind, let's jump back in to this ideal archetype of the dialectic, which is the use of the logos in the best possible way, the most necessary way for all of us. So far, we are 5 arguments in. So we're going to do a brief recap of those 5 arguments, and then we're going to jump into the 6th one. What are we learning about? We're in the first of the 9 hypotheses. 2 through 6 are what happens if the one exists in being, and you think the self is something like that. That's the ideal self. That's what the self is. That's what you are. There are 4 if you think the self doesn't have being. So an atheist maybe, or a materialist who thinks just the physical world exists. That's going to be one of those negative 4, because they don't think there is such a one that has a being or existence. So if there's no such one that exists, and everything is one, that's what a thing means, a one, and the self is a thing of some kind, then you don't have a being kind of one to apply to the self. Your idea of the self is not going to be eternal or immortal. It's going to be, physical. So when I die, I'm just worm food. That kind of way of thinking about yourself. That's going to be one of those 4 negatives. So one of the 4, if the one exists, if the one doesn't. But also the first hypothesis sits above all of those 8 that are the normal 8 categories of our dialectic as his hypothesis, which is of the ultimate realm, which is beyond even existence. So we're talking about a really strange kind of one that doesn't even exist. It's not nihilism. It's not saying that nothing exists, but it's saying there's something beyond even existence. That kind of one is his first hypothesis, and he needs to explain what the hell that is. So he's going to use 2 ways of talking about it. He's going to be describing a kind of one and then applying it to the self. By the way, if a one is this, that's the self. Or he could be making arguments about the self that we're carrying along and understanding and applying that to understand the one. And both of those terms are smushed together. Dialectic, two key terms to explain something. So the one self is kind of a single thing, but he can separate it into two separate words. Talk about one to understand the other, or this one to understand that one, so we can gain an understanding of what exactly is the first hypothesis, the one self. So that's what we're doing. So we're getting that information about the self, about ourselves, about the self, the ultimate, our ultimate goal, our destiny. But also we're learning about how he's doing it, because we also want to learn that too. We want to learn the logos and the dialectic, as well as the one self. Right? Exciting? Cool? Do we say wow?
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Let's jump in. Let's jump in and recap where we are so far. All right. The argument so far. This is us. We're after the logos. We are the archetype of the adventurer. And as we go, this is us. We want to collect key terms that stand out. See if those key terms are in patterns. Are they a pair? Are they singular? Are they a triad? Are they in a group of four? And we're learning to put things within these sorts of patterns. That's our skill tree. So we'll learn a triad here, and then when we learn a new triad, we'll be able to relate them together and see if we can learn about one from the other, kind of like a dialectic. We're looking for a hierarchical order in our terms and in our trees. We're also looking for questions. We're taking these questions in our question sack and taking it with us as the adventurer. That's what we do. That's how we open our mind to this exercise. First argument was, if the one is, what we're after, kind of is, that is not many. It can't be one of the many beings. The one is, it's not many. So his conclusion is, if this is the case, then the self can't be a whole or a part. Aristotle says, how come? So now we've got to explain that conclusion. Well, and that's what we do. So now we're running through the specifics of the dialectic, or the divisions. A part is related to a whole, in relation to a whole. A whole is that which has no parts missing, so both are connected. So if a one, therefore, that's what this means, therefore, if one were a whole or parts, it wouldn't be a many. Because a whole has parts, and a part is also connected to a whole. That's two, and there are many here. Therefore, if the one were a whole or parts, it would be many and not one, but we're after the one self. Therefore, the self is not a whole nor parts. And we see the structure here. So simple reasoning, step by step, together, cooperatively, but also he makes a conclusion about the one, he makes an argument about the one, and he applies it to the self. That's the dialectic. You got one, and you got self. Before we did one on bike and me, or Spider-Man, the superhero. What if we're using one to understand the other? He is saying there's a single thing called a one self. And so far we've got the one can't be many, can't have parts or can't be a whole. Therefore the self that we're after, the one self, can't be a whole, can't have parts. If it has no parts, then it has no beginning, middle, and end, of course. But the beginning and middle and end are limits. Therefore the self has no beginning, middle, and end. There's strange writing over the top. Okay, let's see if we can delete that writing. I don't know why that's there. So therefore, the fourth argument was, if the one is, therefore the one is unlimited. That's where we were. So let's delete this a little bit. So, we said that the self does not have parts. That was our conclusion about the self in our previous argument. We take that with us and say if it's got no parts, then it can't have limits because beginning, middle, and end are parts. The beginning and end are the limits of something. Therefore, and the self has no beginning, middle, and end. Therefore, the one is unlimited. So argument about the self this time applied to the one. And by the way, we put them together. So the one self is not a whole and not parts. The one self has no limits and is unlimited. Then we go through circular and straight to form. The beginning and extremes make circles. If you put the extremes always equal to the middle, you can make a circle. If you put them in line with the middle, you've got a straight line. Everything that's a shape has either straight or curve. So if you can't have these beginning, middle, and ends because there's no limits and no parts, then you can't have circular straight, therefore it can't have form. The self doesn't have a shape. You don't have to worry about the self having to go to the gym to stay in shape. It doesn't exist in any way. We use this to see how the structure of the dialectic as a whole is also in its parts. So we have a definition, self itself, first category of the four, exists in no way. Oh, that's what you're defining? Okay. But why? Give me a demonstration of why that's the case. Demonstration. How does it function? Because it's not in itself nor in another. So if it exists, it'd have to be in something, either in itself, existing in itself, or in something else. The world of existence, the being of existence. Demonstration. But now we don't quite understand how that's the case. So let's divide it up into its key terms or its key arguments. That's division. We're seeing three of the four parts: definition, demonstration, division, or self itself, self to others, others, within the part. That's cool. It's very holographic or symmetrical in that way. Well, you want to hear the arguments of why that's the case? Well, self is not in anything, as it would be circularly comprehended by that which it's in. If it's in something, there is some outside thing that's in. It's in some place, and it'd be touched at all points by that atmosphere of the box or something. If Spider-Man was in his Spider-Man suit, it would be touching his body at all times. It'd be circularly comprehended by his Spider-Man leotards. But we said already in the previous arguments that it's partless and does not participate in a circle. That was our previous conclusion. So it can't be contained in another. But it also can't be in itself either. Why? Because if you're in something, there's you and then there's the thing you're in. So that's two things. Two things, the container and the contained. But we've already said about the self that it's not two. That was our conclusion about the self earlier. So therefore, we conclude about the self, we apply it to the one. The one is not anywhere. The one that we're talking about, that is the one self, isn't anywhere. So we're synthesizing our argument, and now we're applying it back to the original definition If it's not anywhere, therefore it does not exist. What were we hoping to achieve? To show that it does not exist. How do we get there? Through its demonstration in a self or in another. How can we make that clear? Division into arguments. After we've divided it all up, we synthesize that together and then apply it back to the start. Synthesize the arguments. If it's not in something else, it's not in itself, it's not in another, it's not anywhere. And if it's not anywhere, it cannot exist. That last stage of synthesizing those arguments and then applying it back to the start is called synthesis and analysis. That's the fourth category of the dialectic. Definition, demonstration, division, synthesis, and analysis. Right? DDAS, we call that. DDAS. Whoops. DDAS. And we have the SO. Two ways of understanding the dialectic. The categories of the dialectic. DDAS and SO. So that's cool. So within that single argument, we can see the whole. Very beautiful. Oh, what's our conclusion? The one isn't anywhere and it doesn't exist. Cool. You want to go somewhere? You want to go and travel to find yourself? Well, you're not going to find it there because it's not anywhere. The real self. Of course, people mean that metaphorically, and travel's, good for you. But you're not going to find the self there. It's not there. It's not anywhere. It doesn't even exist. Which has even higher implications. Even when you reach the world of being, through meditation or through philosophy, through the development of your own dialectics, exercising your own dialectics. You open the soul to being. You're going to look for the self there. You might not find it there. You might have to keep going. Hopefully you've had practice holding a question so that when you encounter pure beauty and bliss, you're not going to get distracted. Right? We talked about holding a question and not being distracted is the shift from concentration to meditation. Do we have it there somewhere? Can't see it there. Anyway, so imagine facing being in the most beautiful, the most real, the most you thing you've ever experienced, and also being able to keep your focus on your question. Imagine that level of concentration. Hopefully you've had practice because you are this guy, philosopher. So, not whole, not parts, not many, not limited. The one is unlimited. Doesn't have shape. It's not in anything. It's not in itself or anywhere or in another. Doesn't exist. Lots of negatives to understand what the self is, right? Lots of nots. Fifth argument was motion and rest. Well, the two kinds of motion. Moving around in place, which is either rotating around in a circle, spinning around in a circle, or changing yourself. That's a kind of motion. If you're changing yourself, alteration, you're no longer the thing you were before, so you're not going to be one anymore, so you can't do that. If you're rotating, well, you have to have a middle and you have to have parts rotating about itself. Can't be that. If you're moving place to place, well, if you're in a place to begin with, you're in something. And we've already said it can't be in anything or even in itself. If you're going to another place, there's some process of entering into that. So you'd start off here, a little bit inside, and then a little bit more inside, and then a little bit more inside, until you're moving into the thing. But that means there's a part inside and a part outside. Part inside, a part outside. That's two. What do we already conclude about the one self? It's not two, it's one. So it can't be coming to be either. No part inside and outside because a self has no parts. Therefore, the one is immovable. Conclusion about the one now that we can apply to the self also. The one is immovable. The kind of one the self is not movable. Can't be pushed aside. The Hulk can't come and punch it away, move it. It's an immovable object, more immovable even than the Hulk. Or Juggernaut, or whoever is an immovable object in your mythology. Robert California, maybe. Okay, if it's not in motion, is it in rest? If it's in rest, it's resting in something. But we've already said it can't be. What we've already shown, it's not in something, nor in itself. Therefore, the one of the one self is never in itself or in self. So that's the arguments, and then we synthesize it and apply it back to the subject. Therefore, it's not at rest or not becoming to be at rest or being led to stand still. So therefore, at the end, so that's synthesizing this arguments, and then we apply it back to our topic that we started with, our subject. What was our subject? Motion and rest. We can have our adventurous glasses on and recognize motion and rest. Sounds like one of those sulfur pairs. Actually, I can keep that there too. Motion and rest. Sounds like one of those sulfur pairs. What do we mean by sulfur? One of the beings that can have a self in the realm of being. Pair. Pair. Just like whole and part. And what else we do? We did limit and unlimited. Right, we can recognize that. And we've concluded it's neither motion nor at rest. So you don't have to worry about getting super fast so you can chase down and catch the self. It's not running away from you. That's where we are. Next argument. Wow. All right. Alteration, remember? It's not altering itself. It's not carried around in a circle. It's not coming to be at rest or in motion. Oh, it's not at rest or being led to stand still. Okay. Accordingly then, the one, as it is likely, remember, it's a what if. You don't know it yet until you experience it yourself in knowing or knowledge. But as an exercise of the dialectic, it's a hypothesis or likeliness. If this exists, what would follow? As it is likely, it neither stands still nor is moved. Okay, that's our conclusion. Next one. It will certainly not, says Parmenides, it will certainly not indeed be the same, neither with other. Okay, what do we recognize? We recognize same and other. What does that sound like? A sulfur pair. So what we're going to do is do this cool thing where we get the exact translation of a word. So, one of our methods, skills, abilities. So we have skill trees and we have abilities. One of our adventurers' abilities is to gain a precise understanding of a key word where the whole of the text or a whole of a section might hinge. Right? This is reading it as it is and not interpretation. So there's a way of doing that I'm going to share with you. That's cool. So we go to here and we see an empty screen, but I can type into my space keyboard here. Please, Jarvis, bring up the Earth Internet. And bingo. Yes, it's here. Thank you, Jarvis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy a keyword from what we're reading, which is in the Greek, other, because I am aware that this word is a tricky one. First I paste it into here, which translates it into a Greek language. Then I paste it into Google Translate so I can hear how it sounds and see the English. Etero, E-T-E-R-O. The E looks like an E, a T looks like a T, and E looks like an E. The P in Greek is actually an R. You can imagine that little, the bottom of the P, take that out and it actually will look like an R. And the W is an O. Woo. So etero. Etero. So we know how to read it and we know how to pronounce it. Etero, because you might not hear it, but etero is what the lady said. Paste it into this. This is Perseus, and it has dictionaries for us. So this is, we paste etero and we hit go, and it brings up this. We have 3 different Greek dictionaries. Ancient Greek. And then it says back-end Finch failed. What does that mean? I don't know. Here we go. Etero. Wow. Wow, okay, so this is a lot to say here. Let's try a other dictionary, see if it starts small. The other. The altar, the other. Let's try this one. It's loading. Let's try this one at the same time. Another. Any other. Etero. Other. The other. Okay, so we have the other. The other, yep. Okay, so we're pretty sure that the word is other. So we're looking at same and other. In fact, we can look for a PL in these things here that will show up other instances in Plato that uses the same word. Just like we talked about mythology, looking for the same author, how does Plato use Zeus in the different areas? How does he use this word? How does Plato use it? Can we see any PLs? I can't see any PLs. Oh, Plato, down here. Although that's... Oh, without Plato. So we can see, oh, this is how he uses it here, in this text, and this text. But it's loading. Okay, we get the idea. So that's a cool thing that we can do. So, back to the text. We know that this word, etero, means other. So we have same and other. Recognize a self, a pair. Kind of like likeness and unlikeness. It. What it? Will neither be, will certainly not indeed be the same, neither with the other nor with itself. So it can't be the same with the other or with itself. All right. So we don't have same and other, we have other and self as the two things that the same could be like, the same as. Nor will it in turn be other, eteron, we can see, etero, eteron. This O is also an O, W and O in the Greek, ancient Greek is O. Nor will it be other from itself, nor from the other, eteron. Etero, that's a U. So it won't be the same with another or itself, and it won't be other than itself or another. Happy? No. In what way then? Divide it up more, please, says Aristotle. And we say thank you, Aristotle. For if on the one hand, by being in any way other than itself, then it would be other than one. And it would be not one. True. If you're other, then you're different from yourself, and you'd be two things. And most certainly, by being the same with another, it would be that. And thus, it would not be the self. All right, so he's leaning on the idea of self here. If you were the same as some other person, you wouldn't be yourself, you'd be that person. So self. Inherent in the idea of self is not being another. That's what it means. So we can use the definition of self and what's inherent to self to understand the kind of one we're talking about. Hey, the self can't be other because it wouldn't be one thing. We've already said it's one self. And it can't be the same as the other because it wouldn't be the self anymore, to be that thing. So neither in this way could it be just as it is one, but the other one. You can't be at the same time one and the other one. Could not. In this way, it couldn't be as it is. Now, we can see the translator, thankfully, put this is in inverted commas, because we know that it's a kind of is that has already in our argument been defined as not existing. So normally when the Greeks use this word here, let's do our activity again. Apply it to this keyword. See a keyword that stands out. We're making a key definition, so we type in Jarvis. Jarvis, bring up the human internet, please. Thank you, Jarvis. You're welcome, Jed. Put it in here. Translate it into Greek. From the ancient text we have has a Unicode. It's a special hieroglyphs that we have to translate. Then we paste it in here. Estin. So we can learn how to pronounce it. Estin. So we're learning. We also realized that funny O with a little thing on the end is actually an S. Let's zoom in so we can... Sorry about that. Estin. This symbol is an S. Kind of looks like a fat S that's tipping over. T-I and the V is an N. So we can think of a V as upside down. Estin. So we're learning Greek, which just makes it quicker as we go and we read. We're going to recognize letters and Estin. So that's the Greek. Then we paste it into our dictionary. Dictionary. Estin. Woof. Okay. Here we go. Exist. In being. And we're looking for Plato. PL means there's a text in Plato. So this is such a fantastic resource. Could you see that? Let me zoom in. So went to the first A1. Exist. EONTO. That's an S. That's funny C. That looks like it's like going to evolve into be an S one day. It's estos. And we can recognize that similar to estin. So same root words. Like maybe it's like got a ing on the end. So we can recognize that. Look for patterns. Part of the logos. And they are in being. So keywords, existing and being, we know, we can recognize from what we've been talking about, the introduction to the Parmenides. We're looking for the things that exist in being. And we also talked about that's what makes true the philosophy different from opinions or modern philosophy or Stoicism. Sneeze. But also this gives us these little things here. So here is Plato. PL means Plato. Plato's Symposium also has a reference to this word. So we can open that up, which is super cool. And actually, this isn't... it's a quote. So we find it in the Greek. We can load up the Greek. Can we see estin anywhere? So we can actually go Control F, find it, Control paste. The last word. Okay. Try again. No. Okay, I can't find it there. Let's see if there's another section where Plato uses the word. Oh, here we go. PL means Plato. That thing. What are you doing, Jarvis? Okay, it doesn't want us to read that. Oh, Plato here. Let's try to open this one more time. Plato's Gorgias. Okay, so it's loaded up the Greek. And I don't know Greek to that level. What we can do is we can... Over here it's got English. We can focus on the English. Now it's in English. We can also load the Greek on the side too. So now we've got... it keeps doing the back end fetch fail thing. So this part of the Gorgias, which is a dialogue written by Plato, Socrates says, and thus he will find himself possessed of the greatest evil. Of course, the word is bad. Christian translator. That of having his soul depraved and maimed as a result of his imitation of his master and the power he's got. So we're looking for the word exist. I can't see being or existence here. Still loading. Okay, let's try and focus on the Greek. Okay, normally it gives you a section of the text in which the same word occurs, but for some reason the last two didn't do that. But normally it does. Just have to trust me on that, I guess. Back in, fetch. Back in, fetch. All right, so enough of that. We know what it means. It means exists. Maybe it's because I was too far into the alternative definitions. Normally we look at the first one, so we go. Estin. Exist. To be or to exist. Cool, right? Thank you, Jarvis. So why do we go through that exercise? Well, this was a key word being highlighted by our translator as significant. We know what it means in Greek, but also we know what it means from the text. We're defining specifically existence as the realm of existence or the realm of being, to be and to exist. But it's in quotes here because he's using it in a special way, because we've already defined the one as not having existence, but being beyond existence. So, by being the same with another, it would be that. Thus, it could not be the self. So it could neither be, so that neither in this way could it be just as it is one, but it would be the other one. So it's using it in a specific way to the one. It exists. It couldn't be as it is. It couldn't exist as its kind of existence, It couldn't exist as it does, the way we've said that it has so far, as one. It's key. Already said it's beyond existence. It could not. Accordingly, then, on the one hand, it would not be the same with the other, nor other than itself. It could not. So we've concluded it would not be the same with another or other than itself. So let's add that in. So, how does he do it? Let's go through it so we can learn the logos ourselves. Here. Definition. This is argument 6. Definition. What is he going to prove? It would certainly not indeed be the same with it's not the same with the other nor with itself, nor other from itself nor the other. It's not the same with the other nor other from the other. Okay, so we've got the same, other and self, other and self. So it's not the same as either other or self, and it's not other. Let's do a different color. Other than other or itself. There we go. Not the same as its other or self, and it's not other than other or self. Okay, now you might notice something curious about this that reflects what we're seeing in our dialectic. Remember how dialectic has two terms, as self and other. They're giving us 4 combinations: self to self, self to other, other to other, other back to self. Do you notice 4 combinations here? 1, 2, 3, 4. What's interesting is in the Greek language, in the ancient Greek language, the same word for same was self. Depending on the context of how you're using it, the same Greek word, autos. Let's make sure. To auton. There's our auto. Zoom in. There's our auto for self. To auton. Let's look for another same. Here we go. To auton. Now to auton. Let's get it in the dictionary. Oops. This is a day where we are getting very clear on our definitions of the words. Have that. Okay. Google Translate does a weird thing where it translates U's as F's. I think that's because we're in ancient Greek. I think it can be either. So it says tafton, but it's tauton. Something to keep in mind. Funny quirk. Put it in our dictionary. And it loads. And we dance while it loads. Oh, and it does this thing again. Why does it say that? What? Okay, we're not having a good time with this dictionary at the moment. Don't know why. See if I double up if that will do anything. Erase. Okay, we're going to have to lean on Wikipedia. Attic form of altos. What does Attic mean? Oh, it's a classical Greek dialect. Alright, so Wikipedia helped us out anyway. The alton is just a way of saying altos. I'm sure Greek scholars will recognize that prefix ta being something significant. Yeah, Wikipedia says it's a branch, but so the same word for same is self. Why do we bring that up? Well, because we can recognize something significant in our pattern here. Self, other and self. Boom, 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 boom. But also, same to other. Same to self. if the word same is the same as self, we can see in this small example a reflection of the whole. That's cool, isn't it? To see in the part a reflection of the whole, like fractal or a hologram or something. Holographic, like holograms have the whole in each part. Not sure how that works, but fractals do. Dun 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 dun. So yeah, so he wants to prove let's move this to the side because it's not part of the argument, it's just a cool thing that we saw. Move it over here. So he wants to show that the one self that we're after can't be the same as anything or itself, and it can't be other than anything in itself. That's interesting, because if you're not the same as something, then aren't you other than it? How does that make sense? Make any sense? It's mental. I'm not the same as you, but I'm not other than you. How can that be so? That doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, you're on board.
Wow.
We're in the game. Rip. Text. So, in what way? So divide it up. Give me the demonstration or the divisions. For if on the one hand, by being in any way other than itself, it would be other than one, so it wouldn't be one. So we're using one hand. So first division. Where's my pointer? One. Other, if it would be other than itself. Self. It would be other than one. And not one. And we've already said the self is one. Number two. Being the same as another, it would be that, and it would not be the self. Same as other. Not the self anymore. So that neither could it be as it is one but the other one. The other one. It could not be other from another, insofar as it is one, for it is not proper for the one to be other than anything, but simply other, but not in any way other from another. Ooh. Okay, let's read that together. So this is our previous one. It would be other one if it was other than itself. Line it a little bit. On the one hand, it would not be the same as the other, nor other than itself. Okay, so that's a conclusion. So from this we have a conclusion. So the conclusion was, not the same with another, not other than itself. Same as the other, nor other than itself. Now, here is something interesting. So now we're on to, so it's not the same as another, nor other than itself. That's funny, actually, because what we've got here is, first argument is other than self. Other than self. Second one is same as the other. So we're jumping a little bit. He didn't do same as other and self. He did this one and then this one. This is one. Other than self. Or same as the other. Two. That's interesting. Alright, let's keep going. Let's put it in blue. 1 and 2. But on the other hand, surely it would not be other from another, so long as and insofar as it is one. Okay? Not be other from another if it's one. Why not? I'm other from you, but I can be one, can't I? For it is not proper for the one to be other than anything, but simply other, but not in any way other from the other. We have a strange peculiarity here. What is peculiar? Another positive statement. We said it was unlimited before in a strange way that it doesn't have limits. Now we're saying it's other, but in a strange way that it can't be other from anything. So a unique way of qualifying a positive statement about the self. What does that mean? We're saying it is other, but it's not other from anything. It's not proper to say it's other from anything. Aristotle says properly so. But we say, what the hell do you mean properly so? Ask a question. We say,
what in the heck are we talking about here?
Okay, so somehow it is other, but not other from another. So we can say, it's not other from another, which is other from another. That's 3 here. Let's make that in blue. It's the third argument here. It's not that, but it is simply other. So you put in a different color because holy crap. Simply other. Let's keep reading and see what he means by that. It's not proper for the one to be other than anything, but simply other, but not in any way from the other. Properly so, really. Boo, Aristotle. ask a question. Thus, on the one hand, zoom in a little bit more. Thus, on the one hand, it will not be other since it is one. I guess that makes sense, right? If it's one, it can't be other from anything because that's two things. So it can't be other since it is one. What do you think? Can't be, not in any way at all. Let's get rid of some highlighting. Highlight it all and then remove the highlighting. That's a quick way of doing it. Simply others highlighted. We're going to keep that highlighting because that's a positive. It's one of the few times we can actually say something positive about what the self is. What do you think? It's just one, right? But surely, if not, by reason of this, then it will not be other from itself. But if self is not at all other from self, then by being in no way other, self will be other than nothing. What a sentence. By this reasoning, it will not be other from itself. Can't be other from itself because it wouldn't be a self. But if self, that's the reason we had other before, right? It was can't be same as the other because it wouldn't be itself. By this reasoning, it will not be other from itself, but if self is not at all other from self, then by being in no way other, self will be nothing from other. So he's saying we're going to pick up the same reasoning and conclude it's not other from itself. So we've got two then. If it's not other from itself, and it's not other from another, then it's in no way, then it'll be other from nothing. Let's write that down. It didn't really outline the argument from why it's not other from itself. I guess he said we're picking up the reasoning, so we don't have to go through it again. So it's not, what was it? Not other from itself. Oh wait, do we have other from itself already? Oh, we've already got, yes. Okay, so he's saying we've already got other from itself up there. That's why he didn't go into it. Question asked, question answered. So, therefore, seeing as we've already got, it's not other from itself here, and it's not other from another, therefore, it's other than nothing. ATHE are other than nothing. The key word here is than. It's not other in relation to something. It's simply other. So in one way, we are rejecting other. It's not other than anything. But in another way, it is affirming it. So there's two kinds of others. Write that down. Two kinds of other. It's not other than anything. So what does this remind us of? Well, let's go back to our first argument. It's not whole or not parts. Why? Well, because first argument. So we've got argument number 1. The one self is not a whole or not parts. That was our conclusion, our first conclusion. Why? Because part is in relation to whole. Those two are connected in relation to whole. But also, he's defining whole in relation to parts. Whole is that which has no part absent. This term is being defined by itself a pair. They are being defined in relation to their pairs. What's that? That's the previous dialectics on being. One in relation to other. What is likeness? Well, how does it relate to itself? How does it relate to another? Just pick its pair. How does it relate to unlikeness? Likeness and unlikeness. Put those together and you have yourself a pair. One and then the other. The other is defining the one. So, what does that mean? Well, part is being defined as part of a whole. Both these two terms are connected in its definition, as though you're doing a dialectic on part in relation to self, other, or part in relation to another thing, another idea. These are the two things that exist in being. In being, you can define one in relation to its other beings, because there are many beings. Whole also is being defined in relation to a part. So if that's the kind of whole and part you're talking about, then you can say no. But here's a question. Ever seen a whole that doesn't have parts? Why do I say that? Because, let's go back to the argument that we were on. We're up to number 6, I think. Number 6. Oh, down here. He is saying, in here, it can't be other than itself, because if you're other than the one, then you wouldn't be one anymore, and we're after the one self, so it can't be other than itself. But in argument 3, he says it's not argument from another. Why? Because that would be two things. Since it is one. Right? So yeah, since it is one, it can't be from another, because that would be two. Therefore, it's other than nothing. But he said it is simply other. What's that mean? It's not other in relation to self or other in relation to other. It's not other in relation to self. It's not other in relation to other. It's not the kind of other that can fit in those previous dialectics we've done about being. In relation to. It can't be that kind of in relation to. He said it's not other in relation to other. It's not other in relation to self. So if we're defining this in relation to something, if being other means you are other than something or other than yourself, those are the two possibilities, right? You're either other from yourself or you're other from something else other than yourself. You're other from another or you're other from yourself. Two kinds, right? That's why the dialectic is so great. It's so precise. It takes the top of all thinking. If you're other from anything, if you want to know whether you're other, then you're either going to be other from something else or you're going to be other from your own self. There's no other options, which is this, other from other or other from the self, which is the dialectic, self to other. So you could do a dialectic on other as an idea. Other and same. You could think of the word other as different. I have a friend who does Greek and says one translation of this other is different. I think that's why I looked at the text to begin with, but I mean, we should probably pick up the lexicon and have a look at the dictionary, but I think different also fits. Same and different. I think that's a better way of reading it because it's going to make more sense in English. Let's put in the English different to see if it makes more sense. Same and different. You're either different from yourself or different from another. Same thing. Same thing as saying other, right? Good to have both. We are offered to take both. Why? Because we can see same and different as a self a pair, but we can also see same and other in relation to the dialectic. So we could do a dialectic on what is different itself existing in the realm of being. We could do a dialectic on what happens if same exists, to understand sameness as a pure idea. That's one of the exercises, Zeno's dialectics, that we should be doing, right? So we could do a dialectic on same and different. If sameness exists, what can you say about sameness itself? What can you say about sameness in relation to difference as pure ideas? What can you say about difference having been affected by sameness? What can you say about difference in relation to itself? And what can you say about difference and how it relates back to sameness? That would be a really nice dialectic on sameness, using the other term difference to understand it. Just like right now, we're doing a nice dialectic on the self, using the idea of one to understand it, right? But he said it can't be other from other, can't be other from self, can't be those things, but simply other. So that little clue he threw in should stand out to us. It's the video game where the statue is slightly askew, right? Or there are no enemies in an area, or you go into an area and there's a lot of save points and a lot of health potions. Oh, there's something strange about this room, something to look for. There's a hidden gem somewhere or a boss coming up. This is our Sherlock Holmes adventurous caps that we have to be wearing. Why? Because he concludes it's other from nothing. So it can't be this. But he has given us a clue that it is simply other. So what does that mean? If you can think of another that is somehow defined without needing to be other than anything, because it can't be other than your other, can't be other than the self, can't be different from difference, it can't be difference from same. If you can think of that kind of other, then you might have a way, a positive that you can put on the self. So that's why we went back to the whole, because we didn't come up with an idea. We didn't even think about it. It wouldn't even cross our mind. We went along with his idea that whole is defined in relation to parts. And parts is in relation to whole. Okay, it'd be hard pressed to find a one that is parts, because parts is always in relation to whole. I don't think you could imagine a part that's not in relation to whole. That doesn't make sense. But whole, we accepted that whole is defined in relation to parts. Just like if you could find a different or other that's somehow defined without needing another to be different from, to be other from, then you can say that's the self. What? Wow. Mind-blowing.
Wow.
Equally so, again, ousia. Take our discoveries, turn it around, and apply it to our subject. Just like the dialectic. What's the last term? Synthesis and analysis. Synthesize your understanding and then take it back to the start, other back to self, and apply it to what we did before. That's ousia, and that's also the last step in the dialectic. It's a living thing. Everything that you learn about the subject by doing a dialectic, you've now learned a whole bunch of stuff about the subject. What does that mean? That means you can do a new dialectic on it. Start again. Ousia. We are being most like being, because the nature of being is ousia. That's how it has its sustained. It doesn't have a shape, because it's not physical, but it has a kind of self-sustaining ousia quality. Right, so becoming most like the metaphysical, using the highest expression of our physical world. The highest expression of our physical world is the highest expression of our understanding. What's that? The dialectic. What's the last stage? Turning about upon yourself. So what are we doing? We've learnt something special about same and other, And we can turn it back to the start and say, can we apply it to this one? If we rejected that, if we said, okay, the one self is not a whole nor parts. It can't be a whole because it's not a whole of parts. It's not a parts because it's can't be a part of a whole. That's two already. But can we apply to whole the same thing we did to other? Can we imagine a kind of whole that doesn't have parts? Just like we imagine a kind of other that's not other than anything? Don't know. Think about it. It's just a question at this stage. But there was one other point that we came across a positive. We said the one is unlimited. How did we come to that conclusion? Well, we said we know the self has no parts, the one self has no parts, so it has no beginning, middle, and end. Right. The beginning and end are the limits of something. Right. That's obvious. That's a true statement. Self has no beginning or end because there would be parts. Therefore, the one is unlimited. We never defined unlimited, did we? We could have the same way we did whole and parts. We could say that some space. Zoom in. We could say that. Oh, by the way, unlimited is a never-ending series of limits, like counting. One is a limit, 2, 3, 4, a series of limits. And numbers are unlimited. Also, like space. I have a point in space, a point in space, a point in space, a point in space, a point in space. Ongoing. In which case, we would say, well, we could use our reasoning. Well, as unlimited is somehow defined in relation to limits, we can say that the self is cannot be. Therefore, so that's argument 1. Argument 2 would be, but we have said that the one self is one, not many. Therefore, the self or the one or the self, depending on which way you want to go, which one do you want to make a conclusion on, is not unlimited. This could have been our reasoning. It makes sense. It follows. It's true. We're defining unlimited in relation to limits. We didn't do that, did we? We missed this whole step. Why? I know why. Because Parmenides is clumsy. He did it for whole, he did it for parts. Let's see if he did it back over here. This doesn't exist because it's not in itself or another. Kind of similar, but not quite what we're after. He missed that part because he's clumsy. Or because he's telling us something. The first thing he established was one way of reasoning. The first argument. This is what we're looking for in the Logos. How does the opening or the introduction contain everything? What's it telling us about the whole? Of course, you won't see that until you know the whole. So you have to go through the whole dialectic, you have to read the whole text, and then you can turn back around to the beginning and see if you can see the whole in the introduction. That's ousia, that's part of the dialectic, part of reading. Now, the first thing was, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. I'll give you one argument and it's going to contain everything. I'm going to make a statement, demonstrate it. I'm going to divide the arguments up into divisions, and then I'm going to synthesize and bring it back to the beginning to prove my conclusion. The way I'm going to do it is so that's the whole dialectic in a part, right? Amazing. But even within the parts, I'm going to go through a similar process. I'm going to define my terms and use that in the rest of, within the division step, I'm going to start by defining my terms. So even within, so we've got the dialectic as a whole, which has categories, which can be understood as definition, DDAS. Within each of them, you can see DDAS, but even within one of those, you can see definition. The first step in my division is a definition. What do we define? So that's cool. I mean, that's just a cool fractal, beauty that you can see in it if you're interested. And we can say,
Wow.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to define one of these self terms that you've done a dialectic on in relation to its pair. And I'm going to do the same for the other one. And then I'm going to show with reasoning how, therefore, if that's the case, you can reject both. So we're going to learn something about the oneself by saying it can't be contained or defined within these two qualities that I have just defined in relation to each other. So this whole thing started out as very complicated, but now, after a bit of work, it's so simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out a set of self terms, and they're easy. We've got a whole list because we've been seeing it. Whole and part seems to be up in the top of the list. I'll pick that one. Now what am I going to do? Just define it. How? Just in relation to each other. A part is a part of a whole is have all the parts. Easy. Now what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to use one and many as the basic self-pair, the most fundamental self-pair, the question that Socrates had coming in with, the whole point of Zeno's essays, the whole point of Parmenides' poems is the many one, is what is one or is it many? So somehow one and many is the most fundamental one, the most basic one. I'll use that. If it's one, it can't be many, right? Taken for granted. That's the axiom, the principle you take for granted. Just use that to show, well, if part and whole are defined and whole and part are defined in relation to each other, can't be many, it's not the one. Simple. You're learning about the oneself, and it's so simple given the work we've done on it already. This is leveling up. But what does he do next? He changes the game a little bit. He doesn't define them in relation to each other. So he shows that of the self-pair, what's the self-pair? We have, let's go a different color. We have limit, I said this color. We have limit and unlimited. That's our self-pair. I'm going to shift gears. I'm not going to define limit in relation to unlimited. I'm going to define it in relation to beginning, middle, and end. I'm not going to define unlimited unlimited in relation to limit, I'm going to leave it open. You figure it out. And I'm not going to therefore reject it. I'm not going to say the one is not unlimited. I'm going to say it is unlimited. You figure it out. That's the puzzle he's leaving us. Okay, well, let's see. We've got enough of a pattern to apply that way of thinking. Let's do it the way he could have done it. Unlimited in relation to its self-a-pair limit. Unlimited is a never-ending series of limits, like counting or in space. Keep going. Therefore, you're defining this in relation to its pair, which is the way that we do it. When we say something's infinite, we mean it's never-ending series of things. You can count for infinity. But if you say something's unlimited, but it doesn't have a series of limits, what are you talking about? I can't think of anything in the physical world like that. So he could have done it this way. Unlimited is a never-ending series of limits. These are our pairs, defining one in relation to its pair. Give some examples so Aristotle can follow along, counting a space. Then finish the argument. But we've already said that the one self is not many, so it can't be that. Therefore, synthesize and apply it back to the thing you want to define. Therefore, the one or the self, whatever you were going to prove, is not unlimited. Proving what you hoped to do at the beginning. So you would start by saying, oh, Aristotle, wouldn't you say that the one or the self, depending on which one you want to use you want to define, the one or the self is not unlimited? Aristotle would say, but why? But why? And then you would do this. He didn't do it. We could. Follow. It'd be part of the logos. It would be part of the reasoning. It'd follow the structure. Didn't do it. Why? Either right at the beginning, he is telling us something. This is the form. This is the sameness. Now, here is something unique you need to look for. This is enough. This is enough for you to see a pattern because you're philosophers, you're exercise, you've done that xenodialectic, you know the structure of the dialectic, you can recognize the pattern, you can recognize the self of pairs, you can recognize definition, demonstration, division, and then synthesis, analysis. You can recognize the self of pairs. You've done work, you've leveled up as philosophers already, so there's enough for you to recognize the pattern. Now, I'm going to break the pattern. Why? To tell you something. What's he using? Sameness and difference. He is using it to talk to us. You won't recognize it unless you've gotten and far enough along the dialectic to recognize, where are we up to? Sameness and difference. For where we're at. He is using sameness and difference in his dialectic that we can now recognize now that we've reached sameness and difference. Oh, there's something unique here where he is saying he includes both. Here is the sameness. It's not other because it can't be other than self or other. It can't be either of those. That's what's same about his dialectic. But he's thrown in a difference. It is simply other or simply different. Sameness and difference are being used within his section on sameness and difference to communicate something to us as a clue for fellow adventurers. This is such a high-level use of the dialectic that Parmenides has. You're interested in sameness and difference? Apply it. Apply the understanding that you're gaining to the thing itself. That's ousia. Is there sameness and difference in this dialectic? Yep. This is the same. Rejecting this and rejecting this. But this is different. Okay? You've seen something. Now apply it back. Let's apply it back to the start. Oh. This is the first argument, and this is the definition of sameness. Not whole nor parts, the way that they're connected. What's the next argument? It's a little bit different. This would have been the same one we did, but we did a different one. What's different? We came with a positive conclusion. That's so different. I thought the one self was nirvana, emptiness of qualities. Isn't that what the Buddhists say? Difference, right? So now we can recognize something. He's teaching us something. There's a certain way of understanding the ideas in which you can purify those qualities from the self. But if you look at each of those self pairs and you understand one of them, the greater one, unlimited, in a unique way that's unlike any other way you looked at unlimited, like counting or space, you define it with its pair. Any way you look at unlimited, you define it by its series of limits, counting, space, anything you can think of that's unlimited, right? If you had unlimited money, you'd have lots of dollar bills that are itself limits. So, if you take these self pairs and you take the higher one, like unlimited, but you use it in a unique way that isn't defined by its partner, you might have a positive quality that you can use to understand the true nature of the one self. So it's going to be other than any other thing that you've used unlimited for. What does that mean? Using it other, but different than anything. What was our conclusion in argument 6? It's simply other. You will not find another other like this. It's other than nothing, so it's not other, that kind of other. But if you have a kind of other that is unlike anything else, that isn't defined by being other than something, you've got something. You've got some gold there. By the way, what's that idea of other that's unlike anything else? Unique. The one self is unique. It's not other than something. Like you can't say, well, I'm the only person wearing a hat because there's no one else at the party wearing a hat. So my otherness is defined by all the others. Or I'm coming to the party other than I did yesterday because I'm wearing my hat. So I'm other than myself yesterday. These are all regular kinds or normal kinds of use of the word other. But we're saying the one self is simply other. It's not in relation to others or sames. It's not in relation to these guys. So therefore, unlimited was not defined in relation to its pair. It's a kind of unlimited that is unique. So now we can use our definition of the one self here. We could say it's unique. We've got something in our back pocket. Unique. I'm just going to make it better than that. Unique. Now, what do we do as adventurers, as philosophers? What's the game? We take questions, we take key terms. Now we've got a key term in our sack. We've got a key term that we can apply to the highest level of understanding of the oneself. What's the key term? Unique. Let's use it. we also do Usia. So I'm adding this to as well. So we also have do Usia. So could we use that key term to understand what we saw previously? So we had a question. So now we're using a key term in relation to our question. What was our question? Why the heck did he say that the one self was unlimited? He didn't define what that was. It was different, other than his previous argument. So what the hell is he talking about? That's our question. Now we have a key term. Would it be fair to say that the one self is unlimited, not in this way, a never-ending series of limits, but the one self is unlimited in a unique way? Is there any other way that something is unlimited that's not a series of limits and therefore a many? Interesting. So now we can understand this question using, or from argument 2, from argument 6. We have something, we've gained something, we've got a new skill, we've got a new term we've got a new weapon in our inventory, a new key term, right? We can use that to understand argument 2. The one is unlimited in a unique way. Wow. Not enough to understand what kind of unlimited it is, but still, we're leveling up. So, what do we know about the one self so far? Well, it's not a whole the way it was defined that way. Maybe it could be seen as a whole that doesn't have parts. We don't know. It's just a hypothesis. If we have here's a way. If we have a unique kind of whole that is some way unlimited, but not defined in relation to its pair, it's not a part, it's not a series of parts, could we say the one is a unique unlimited whole? A uniquely unlimited whole? Maybe. That's a question we got open. Because so far, all we've got is it's not a whole that way. It's not a part in that way. It's not a limit. It's not, what else do we have? It's not in itself or in another. It's not existing. It's not, doesn't have shape. It's not circular or straight. It's not moving anywhere. It's not changing. It's not rotating. It's not going anywhere. And it's not even at rest. It's not the same as anything. And it's not other than anything. But it is unlimited. It is unique. And it is unlimited in a unique way. Could we do the opposite? Could we say that it is other in an unlimited way? Could we say it's simply other? It's simply other, but it's not other than, it's not other than anything. So could we say that if it's free from being defined by something, you're only other than everyone at the party if you're the only one at the party wearing a hat. But if someone came in wearing a hat, you're not different anymore. If you are other without being tied to anything else, is that a kind of unlimitedness? So can we say we are unlimitedly unique? The same way we said we are uniquely unlimited? Don't know yet. These are questions. These are hypotheses. We bring them with us. Okay? Fantastic. Wonderful. Interesting. I think that's enough to go on for a while. I think that's enough to ponder about. I'm very eager to jump into the next argument. Actually, we haven't even finished this argument. I'm going to take a quick break and we'll finish this argument. I hope you're finding this exciting. I hope you're saying,
wow. And
I hope you stick around.